4 ambulance services in Kentucky are dealing with staffing shortages and more runs. Officials say they believe the problems began with COVID.
The issues are improving in some areas, but it remains critical in others. WKYT's Phil Pendleton has more.
Laurel County's Ambulance Incorporated is typically very busy, engaged in run after run. It has been that way pretty much ever since COVID, and it seems like the run volume has increased ever since the pandemic about 4 years ago. And while they say they are fully staffed now, they say the situation hasn't always been that way, and across the state, it's much the same.
We lose more paramedics every year than we gain, unfortunately.
The chair of the Kentucky Board of EMS told lawmakers Tuesday that ambulance services are still struggling to hire help, all the while the call volume goes up. The supply is dropping, the demand is increasing. Ambulance Incorporated in Laurel County is one of the busiest services in southeast Kentucky with 35 to 40 calls a day. Director Jamie Mills says they are fully staffed now. They had to spend a lot of money to do it.
We had to throw a ton of money that we didn't have budgeted into having in-house classes, sign-on bonuses.
I say shortage, we use that term a lot. It truly is a crisis. I mean, we have services that are going to shut down if we can't find a solution to this problem.
EMTs and paramedics that work here say that the job satisfaction is extremely high. They say there is a lot of satisfaction in knowing that they can work to save lives. In Laurel County, Phil Pendleton, WKYT.
And lawmakers were told that some ambulance services are surviving only because their requirements have been reduced on how many paramedics they have to have on their staffs.